Hey there, super friends. It's Joey with Last Point Gaming. Today is Thursday, October 24th, 2019. And today, and probably tomorrow, we're going to talk about Kingdom Death Monsters V1.5. So the plan is to try to limit little sidetracks and today get through the reality of the game, you know, the board, the basic premise, pieces, etc. And then the next episode I do is basically going to be telling the story that I got to live out in the turn and a half I played with Epidemic. So last Friday, Boo had a dance, a little junior high school dance. She's growing up so fast. Friday night. And I wasn't going to make husband drive her to the dance and pick her up, lugging around Bird and Girly McBabyface too. So I skipped F&M so I could take her and pick her up, and that meant I was actually free to hang out Friday night, which meant I got to hang out with Epidemic. So, I'm not 100% sure, but if I recall correctly from our conversation Friday night, you can't actually currently buy this game, but it sounds like it will be available publicly soon. I think he said like there's a Black Friday sale on it. He of course has his copy because he backed their Kickstarter, you know, at a high enough level to get all the gap he did. So, the first thing about this game is the box is like super classy looking. And I mean, it's just beautiful for, especially when you consider it's, you know, a cardboard box. The box is entirely black, but has a kind of satin finish to it, like demi-gloss. Not really glossy, but not really matte either. And all of the like lettering and the numbering for the version on the side and everything is like raised high gloss. It almost feels like a vinyl-y covering to it. Like some kind of plasticky paint. It's anyway, y'all don't care about that. So that's the first part of this game that I absolutely marveled at, is you have a bunch of different decks. You know, there's the AI deck for the showdown, there's the hunt deck, there's the hero's actions deck, there's the settlement deck, there's like the advancements deck. Lots of cards. It's kind of reminiscent of Arkham Horror in that way. And there's like little tokeny bits and that kind of thing. But what's really neat, or what really struck me about the box, is inside is a tray that everything goes in. And instead of having, you know, very stiffly measured openings for all the different decks, you know, with the 1/8 of an inch buffer between, it looks like there's just kind of card troughs where the cards can sit up on their sides, and dividers for everything. Like, Epidemic handled, you know, getting any of the decks we needed, any cards we needed, because he knows his way around the game pretty well. But, like, it was super quick. There was no digging for stuff. There was no, like, let me take out my baggie and search out all the tokens of this type, or let me sift through my hoard of baggies full of different cards to find the correct deck. You know, it's really efficient, and it does actually lessen the amount of space you need to play. Like, I'm pretty sure we thought about doing it before with the Firefly board game, because we've gotten a couple of the deck expansion packs that, like, add items or add ships or, you know, whatever. And so unfortunately not everything fits in our core box anymore. And, you know, it's just kind of a pain going through all the decks. And this kind of makes me want to take like one of our Magic Fat Pack boxes and make some damn dividers and like do this with any game that has a bunch of cards that go with it that have to be separated out. Because that's like I enjoy playing Arkham Horror, but you need like 3 miles of table space and, you know, like 3 hours to set up and then another 3 hours to clean that, or to take everything down. But with the layout in the storage within the box, like we just kind of played everything out of that, and it seems to keep everything like incredibly organized. If I recall correctly, there are 4 different like game boards. One is bigger than all the rest. That's the like showdown board where you fight your main adversary at the end of a hunt. The box, I'm not great with spatial relations, so I am like taking some straight up wags here. I'd call it about a foot deep by maybe 2 foot wide by somewhere between 3 and 4 feet long. So the showdown board is as long as the box, you know, give or take the buffer of the actual thickness of the box as far as footprint's concerned. It's as long as the box and 2/3 wider. 3 times as wide. There we go. Because it does fold in the thirds. Everything seems to fit very nicely in the box. Like, I vaguely watched Epidemic pack it up when we were, you know, done with the turn and a half we did. And I didn't pay much attention, but he didn't seem to struggle with anything. There was no like, oh, here, let me help you with that. Like, it just kind of all went back in its place. Then you have the settlement phase board, which is about as long as the box, but, you know, only about the same width. But because you don't have a settlement phase while you're in the middle of the showdown, so you can just lay it over the showdown board. That's what he did with it. And then you have the hunt board and the showdown like action board where you track everything going on during the showdown. And that may be the same board flipped over. I'm not positive. I probably should have paid a little more attention. But, you know, I was just hanging out with my buddy, and, you know, he was really psyched about this game, so I was excited to give it a shot, and, like, just did not anticipate how freaking awesome it was. Though I will give the caveat, I can definitely see why this game particularly, oh wow, that word's really hard, appeals to folks like Epidemic and I. Because it is all about a story. That's what it is. Ultimately, everything you're doing is telling a story. And that's one of the really neat aspects about the game, is kind of every action that happens. You know, when you have to draw a settlement action during your settlement phase. And there's just a little story blurb on the card about, you know, what's happening. And you, of course, make a die roll because we're gamers. That's how we live and that's how we die. And based on the result of this roll, you know, you find out what happens. And it can trigger future events. There's a lot of paper tracking with this game because it's... Don't really look at it as you're going to sit down and you're going to play a full game. It's more like playing in a role-playing campaign. So, what are you doing there, friend? So you have to keep track of a lot of things on the characters and the campaign itself. If we actually replace Leah for Christmas and I get a new rig that has enough power to do it, I've always really wanted to get into app development and play around with it. I think I might try to put together a campaign character tracking app for this. to cut down on some of the paper usage. It's more of just a fun thing for me to do, and there's a neat way to apply it. Anyway, so how you roll on these charts determines what happens now and can also have an effect on things that happen in the future. And then in addition to the, story bits on the cards, there's a book of little story bits that are linked to different events that happens. Like, oh yeah, go look up the Bone Witch event. And all these story pieces are small chunks and very modular. So they click together to build these neat kind of custom stories where it's like, yeah, I've played 3 different campaigns, and all of them we've done the Bone Witch, we've done Rivalry, we've done, this or that. But different things happening in a different sequence, it can feel unique. Another game this is really reminiscent of to me, but a lot deeper and richer than, I guess, is Betrayal at the House on Haunted Hill. I love that game. So much so that Epidemic actually got us a copy, or like our own copy for Christmas one year. And if you've never played that game, you build the board as you go. So yeah, every time you play, you're playing with the same stack of room tiles. You're playing with the same events in the deck and with the same omens in the deck and the same items, etc. But because it's randomly decided which room goes where and which haunt you're doing, like, it adds a lot of replayability. So while these story pieces are very small and are little standalone pieces, they weave together to contribute to this overarching plot line in your particular campaign. Let's see here, what else? What else am I missing here? Oh, and there's a bunch of models, of course. You have, your little character models and the Lonely Tree, which is just badass looking. And he hasn't even gotten around to painting that one yet. Now, Epidemic doesn't keep his models in the box, so I don't know if there's actually space to do that. Epidemic takes a lot of pride in his painting of his models, and with good reason. He's very talented. He has really honed a beautiful skill there. So I understand why he may keep them separate, even if it is possible to just pack it all in the box to more protect them. But either way, if that's the only thing that doesn't fit in the box, I'm pretty okay with that. There is at least one standalone, almost graphic novel-style storybook outside of the nice hardbound book you get with all the stories in it and like the game instructions and whatnot. I don't know if there's more, or if that one in particular, because it does tie into the Lonely Tree, and he did mention to me in version 1 they decided that there were problems with the whole Lonely Tree thing, so they're making an effort to fix it. So this may be supplemental and kind of what makes this version 1.5, or there may be other events. Again, I don't actually own the game, though I did mention to husband after I got home that we're looking to buy a new house, bigger house, because we do not have enough space, and one of the big things we're looking for is a nice big open gaming space. And I told him if we end up with a place with a spot big enough that we can set up a table just dedicated to this game, I would drop the $350 on it without thinking. His eyes bugged out of his head a little bit at the cost of the game, but I really feel like it's worth it. Luckily, I got the hookup with having a best friend that is an extreme board game aficionado and has excellent taste in them. So, until that time comes, I can just go hang out with him and play his copy. So the basic premise of the game, and if you're listening to this on a platform that has the description, and I say that because I record my episodes on Spreaker, I publish them to Spreaker. I do have to manually go in and tell it to push to my YouTube channel, but everywhere else we're at, apparently we're on like iHeartRadio and Spotify, we may be on, oh god, what's the Apple one? iTunes. Spreaker just kind of pushes everything out there. And I do throw in a description. I have tried formatting it, and then I realized when seeing the episode pushed to my YouTube channel that it just disregards all my formatting, so I stopped bothering. And it's usually just the links on, follow me on Twitter, and check out my DeviantArt, and check out my YouTube. But there is an additional link attached to the description of today's episode to a YouTube video of a guy basically reading the intro to the game, because he can do it way better than I could, even with the material in front of me, let alone trying to do it from memory. So I totally recommend you go give that a listen, because it's just fun to listen to, honestly. But the basic premise is your starting characters kind of wake up in the darkness. They have no memories. None. They're basically infants. They don't have language. That's like a societal development you have to achieve. And their world is total darkness, except for these lanterns. There's no sun in the sky, there's no moon, there's no stars. It's just dark. And the ground is all made up of stone faces, which is really weird. Now, I'm going to have to mention this point. I'm not going to linger on it too long, else I'm going to get myself in some trouble. These people, of course, without language or any sort of technology or any real societal development, they are very scantily clad, including, many bare-chested women. It doesn't seem to be displayed in an overtly sexual way. But that's all I'm going to say there. There are tons of boobs. Lots of boobs. So, if that bothers you or offends you, this game may not be for you. Anyway, moving right along. So, your starting characters are these very primitive... They don't know anything. They just woke up in the darkness. And there's ink over their eyes. Like, not over the eyeballs, but like over the eyelids and that area of the face. I'm sure that ties into something somewhere. I don't know what it means. And these lanterns, aside from being a source of light, seem to be a metaphysical representation of life force or the soul or whatever you want to call it. So settlements spring up around these things called lantern hordes, which are basically big baskets of these lanterns. And their only way to really track passage of time, they call it lantern years. The game does. I don't know what your settlers would call it. They're developing language. Is they take one of these lanterns away from the horde and set it by itself, and the time it takes for it to burn out and to need to be replaced is a lantern year. Each turn sequence represents the completion of a lantern year. So the beginning of the turn sequence is your settlement phase, and that's where you spend all the resources that you have. Well, you don't have to spend all of them, you can bank them. But you spend resources to develop new weapons, new clothing, armor. And you can spend resources for other things like learning new technology, learning different achievements. You also draw a settlement action. When we played, we got Rivalry, which is why I keep mentioning it. It's the only one I know of because we actually went through 2 settlement phases, and both times, that is the card I drew. Oh wait, no, it's not. That's right. Because of the way I rolled on the first Rivalry, we had to do it again the next Lantern year. Never mind, I'm lying, I'm wrong. a dirty, dirty liar. Anyway, so you do your settlement activity, your settlement action from the deck, spend resources, and then you have his settlement. I don't know what determines this, because I was playing in the campaign, he's been playing on his own for a while, but they get 4 settlement actions, and what's available to you varies on different concepts and achievements you've unlocked for your settlement. Like, if you have developed a shrine, which basically represents religion, you can pray to it and get buffs before you go out on your hunt. After the settlement phase, you have the hunt, where it seems to be cards randomly pulled from a deck, laid face down across the hunt board. It seems like you're supposed to have multiple steps to the hunt, unless you roll very squarely mediocre on the first event and trigger the showdown, which is what happened when I played. And then you have the showdown, where you fight the thing you were hunting. So when we played, his settlement hunts the white lions. Like, that's kind of their shtick. They're really proficient with it. So he said we could either hunt a white lion or we could hunt the inside-out goat, which is apparently some kind of antelope. I don't remember what it's called, but the model looks like an inside-out goat, and it's pretty badass looking, really. I opted that we fight the white lion, since, you know, he's already done that a bunch of times and everything, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. You have your showdown, reap the rewards of your showdown, hopefully don't die in your showdown, and you go back and do another settlement phase, and, you know, start the next turn. So that's the basic mechanics of the game. Everything seems to be determined mostly by rolls of d10s, though there are custom d6s for, like, wound locations when you're fighting. Be it in the showdown or another smaller mob on the hunt. Just like in role-playing, you know, each character has gear, and, you know, like, if you have a full set of rawhide armor, you get an additional point of armor. You know, different things matched up together give you different bonuses. So, in that respect, it's very reminiscent of when I used to play EQ. You know, there were those certain specialty prestige armor sets that you got additional benefits from having every piece in the set. Or they give you lower level bumps on their own. You have different tools, but you have to develop the ability to make those tools. You know, everybody starts out like primal hunting. You do have children, like, your settlement grows by having children. It's not very graphic, and in fact, like, we actually got to go through that, and it was very, I would say, tastefully written. Let's see here, what else? What else we got? I think that's about it for the basic ins and outs of how the game works. It's really high level, of course, because, again, I don't actually own this game, so I'm going off of what I remember from, you know, things we did Saturday night, or Friday night, and things Epidemic told me about the game. He really loves this game, so we've actually talked about it a few times. This is just the first time I got to play it. You do get character sheets in the box, but he is to the point where he has just a couple left, so we don't write on those anymore because he photocopies them. And, like, you have a campaign tracker where you track when it says, oh, okay, you know, because this happened, you need to add this event in 2 lantern years. So, you know, in 2 turn sequences... Oh, I thought I just missed my exit for a minute. You're going to have this event. Now, Epidemic is purist. Like, one of the things I really loved about this game is each story in the book it's only one page. It's just a little blurb of story. And, the chart for what happens with the rolls or, different choices you can make. But the opposing page is like an illustration. And the artwork in the book, some of it's a little more simple, some of it's a little more, deep. But it's all just very well done. It's really a stunning looking game. And I was kind of flipping through the storybook, looking at these pictures, and he's like, whoa, don't do that, don't read ahead. I'm like, oh, no, just looking at the art. I can guarantee you, he has not read any of the story bits that he hasn't personally done throughout playing this game. Because that's some of the excitement, the first time you have the Bone Witch event, which, of course, was something that happened in the turn sequence and a half that we played. Which is why I keep referencing it. There are only so many events I know in the game because, I only played this small snippet of it. And that was enough to make me just, really want to have this game. It's pretty awesome. So it's kind of like board game meets civilization building game meets role-playing game to create, one very rich experience. Way back, when I met husband, actually, and I've talked about this, we met through a mutual friend. He was running a World of Darkness Gehenna campaign for Vampire because they were ending the World of Darkness. And this friend got him to invite me, and that's how we got to know each other. It's how we started seeing each other, and eventually led to us procreating and getting married and all that happy stuff. When I'd worked at Borders a billion years ago in the cafe, and we had game on Sundays, and then the next week I would be telling my coworkers what happened at game. And two of the women I worked with, on separate occasions were like, I can't figure out how you go from sitting around a table with a bunch of books and dice to these stories you tell, and wanted to come watch us play, and ended up, doing some role-playing with us. They weren't really hardcore gamers, either one of them, but they really enjoyed role-playing, from that experience. And that's what this really reminds me of. But because you have these turn sequences broken out, it's not like when everybody gets together for Vampire and it's like, okay, we do some things. Oh, guys, big combat's about to start, so we're gonna need 3 hours. Are we good to stay for 3 hours, or do we need to kick this to next week? And then you spend the next week, the whole time you're there together, rolling dice, doing this major combat, and then advance the storyline next week. Everything's broken down into these nice little pieces. We played one full turn sequence and then an additional settlement phase. And again, the turn sequence is broken down into settlement, hunt, showdown. Though the settlement phase, I would say, is, well, it's not really a fair representation because, again, I did trigger the showdown accidentally on our first hunt action. So, let's see here. I was over there for 4 hours. And in the midst of us playing, we were chatting about different things. We went out so I could smoke a couple times. And we did end up, at the end of the night before he walked out with me, and, we were standing in his driveway talking for, an hour or so. So, the time it took to go through this 1 1/3 turn sequences was probably about maybe 3 hours. So that's the nice thing, because there are these clear breaks and delineations in, what's happening. You can really kind of customize based on, how much time you have to play, and not get stuck in a position where it's like, oh man, one of our players has to leave, and we really don't want to, run their stuff without them here, and what do we do? It's pretty easy to come to a good stopping point. So that's basics of what I remember of the reality of Kingdom Death Monsters. Tomorrow, either in the morning or the evening or both, I'm going to walk through, the story that I got to play with him with this. So, I'm at daycare. I gotta pick up the kids because apparently I beat husband home. As always, if you made it this far with me, thank you very much for listening, and hopefully I'll talk to y'all tomorrow.